Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Tuesday, September 5th, 2023, and today a federal court ruled that the state of Alabama must redraw its congressional maps yet again after diluting black voters intentionally in their brand new congressional map. Now, if you don't remember the drama circulating around the Alabama congressional map, it largely came into play earlier on this year when a lawsuit was put forth suing the state of Alabama for violating the Voting Rights Act. And ultimately what happened was that a conservative court with two of the justices appointed by President Trump ruled in a 3-0 decision that the Alabama Supreme Court, the Alabama congressional map must be redrawn by the legislature for diluting black voters. The Alabama Attorney General office immediately went all the way to the United States Supreme Court, in which the United States Supreme Court sided with the justices that struck down the map originally. In a surprise decision, the state of Alabama had to redraw its congressional maps for the first time in decades. Alabama had to draw in two majority black districts, in so many words, two Democratic districts, and ultimately this court ruled again that they failed to do as such. In fact, they go so deep in the description around the congressional map, saying that they failed to comply with the court order. They failed to create a second majority black district or anything, quote, close to it. And they even go as so far as to say that the state officials ultimately did not even nurture the ambition to provide the required remedy. It was a very big pushback against the state officials, the state legislature, everyone around who decided against following through on the court's decision, decided against making the right choice according to the court, and ultimately they are now ruling yet again that the map must be redrawn. They reaffirm that this new map does continue the undercutting of the power of the state's black voters. The map went from a 30% black district to a 40% black district, in which the argument was made that it was plurality black. In actuality, it was not. It was still a majority white district, but at the end of the day, the ruling from the court wasn't to create a plurality black district. It was to create a majority black district to comply with the Voting Rights Act, with over a fourth of the state's population being black residents, with just a singular district in place today that complied previously that no longer complies, according not only to this federal court, but also the United States Supreme Court. They say the 2023 plans plainly fails to do so. And there are many conversations around what this means for other states, but in the immediate, Alabama will more than likely see an appeal headed back up to the United States Supreme Court. The Supreme Court then again says, nope, you have to redraw the map, and they repeat the process, except this time the federal court ordered a special master. If you don't know what that means, essentially Alabama previously sent it back to the courts here. They sent it back to the state legislature, and now they're deciding that somebody else has to do it, that it cannot be the state legislature again. Because what the state legislature did still kept a Republican district. It was a Donald Trump district, and it was meant to be slightly more competitive. So in a blue wave year, potentially, there could be a black representative, but in a traditional year, it would not be, in fact, would be a lean Republican district at default. So they tried to maneuver the system in a way that made it so Democrats still found themselves unable to win this district at default level. They thought that they would be able to get by these three judges. I mean, two of them were appointed by President Donald Trump. This is far from a liberal court. But they continuously, and they have before, and they will do it again, reaffirmed that the Voting Rights Act must be obliged to, and the United States Supreme Court additionally reaffirmed that earlier on this year and will likely do again. The House of Representatives elections are so important to the Republican Party, especially given that they have just a 5-seat advantage. And with expected redraws in states such as New York and South Carolina and now Alabama and Louisiana, you're starting to see a lot of conversation around these incremental gains for Democrats. If the map was to hold, Democrats might actually end up winning back the House majority in 2024, not even by a little. The problem lies in the fact that even though Republicans saw a 10-point swing from the 2018 midterm elections and a 6-point swing from the 2020 presidential, you still found that Republicans ended up with just 222 seats in the House. Just a 10-seat net gain from what was expected to be, according to Kevin McCarthy, a 50 to 60 seat gain from the Democratic Party, as they had once experienced under President Obama. But the problem with that was that abortion came into play, a major, hard-hitting issue that allowed Democrats to win many of these swing districts and will allow them to win again in 2024. So assuming all else stays even, if Alabama does see the special master introduce a court map similar to this one, where there would be a default Democratic district alongside a safe Democratic district, it would put the Democratic Party in a better position because it is happening all across the country. It's happening in Louisiana. It's going to happen in South Carolina within the decade. I mean, you are going to see potentially in time for 2024 numerous redraws using the Alabama court procedure, using the verdict, using the precedent. And while it may end up going all the way up to the Supreme Court, maybe there will be, motions to pause the use of the congressional maps or hold them out through 2024. At the end of the day, these court cases are valid, legitimate, and have been affirmed by Republican justices and the U.S. Supreme Court, which leans conservative. So all around, good news, I would say, for Democrats. This is yet again another victory. Republicans thought they would be able to get around it. I mean, you can see in the map that they proposed. Let's go ahead and find. I don't believe they have the perfect congressional map here from what was proposed, but ultimately the Alabama map is back in litigation. I mean, they tried to put forth again that map that was slightly more in favor of the Democratic Party, but still very blatant in its efforts to dilute black voters. I mean, all across the country, you have seen that this has been a case, and Alabama served as the primary one, where again, this court's decision will likely be used in many other circumstances. But I think it also goes to show that the courts are not afraid of striking down maps numerous times. This was a concern in the 2022 midterm elections when Ohio's map continuously was struck down, but they kept sending it back to the state legislature to make a decision on their end about whether or not they have, their own ways and maneuvering to adopt the court's decision, the court's ruling. All around, what we saw was that the Ohio legislature just kept putting back, moving forward the same continuous congressional map. I mean, you saw maybe minor shifts from iteration to iteration. 3 times the court struck it down, but in Alabama, it's different. Instead of allowing the state legislature to do, again, this special master with a demographic based out of California alongside somebody who has worked under multiple Republican attorney generals in the state of Alabama, they will be drawing the map. And that map, again, will be subject to criticism, to, appeals, whatever it might be, but the state legislature no longer has the ability to draw their own congressional map as they once did. And it isn't a question of partisan politics. I mean, Alabama very much was and is diluting black voters as of right now. Again, 27% of the state's population is black, and yet somehow 6 out of the 7 districts are Republican. And this happens because of intentional redistricting, intentional racial discrimination through the redistricting process. There's a reason why you see Montgomery and Birmingham in the same congressional district, despite having many parts of the state very different from one another. I mean, there is a way to break up this district, but again, it's all about consolidating the Democratic Party's vote share, and that's what the GOP has tried to do and has done continuously for the past decade. I mean, we can see, looking at Alabama, let's take a look at the past election results. For instance, Alabama in 2022, 6-1. In 2020, 6-1. In 2018, 6-1. In 2016, 6-1. In 2014, 2012, 2010. In 2008, this was a very good year for Democrats. 2006 was a little bit better nationally, but 2008 was weird. Very strange year. Alabama's 2nd district went to Democrats. Alabama's 5th district went to Democrats. But by the next year, you saw that Republicans dominated. But in every year but those exceptions, sometimes 2, but sometimes not. Right? And that was the problem here. And even 2 doesn't do justice for the amount of the vote share. For example, in 1998, Democrats got 45% of the vote, yet just 2 out of the 5 districts here. I mean, you're talking about, what is that? Maybe 30%, less than that. I mean, nothing super significant, or around 30%, but still 45% of the vote. In 2000, sure, it was 59-34, a little bit closer to what it actually was. But then in 2002, 2004, 2006, 55-44, what happens here? It's 5-2. Again, gerrymandering is not new to the Republican Party. It's not new to the Democratic Party. But in Alabama, it has been very clearly lopsided in favor of one direction. They know exactly what they are doing when they pull in these 2 cities and create a district that's Democrat plus 52. When the rest of the state, Republican plus 27, plus 28, plus 42, plus 48, plus 30. These are things that are manufactured. This is not the general, consensus or population of the state. Democrats, at a minimum, should have 2 districts in Alabama, should we be playing it fair. And though many other states do not, Democrats and Republicans alike, in this particular case, it isn't just an issue of partisan redistricting, it's also an issue of racism. It is also an issue of the diluting of black voters in Alabama, and that is the fundamental problem that this court has with this state. So I imagine that in 2024, we will have a map, as the state, officials have said here. They need a map by October to implement it in time for the November 2024 election. The Alabama court here says, you know what, that's fine. You will get a special master that will draw a map on time that by the 2024 election, you have to implement it. And this special master is going to begin now, which means it will go to the Supreme Court for an appeal. But in the meantime, a map will be made, a map will be produced, and a map will likely be implemented potentially before the Supreme Court even weighs on it. They might make that, decision immediately, refuse to hear the case, similar to what they did in the last time this court case came before the state of Alabama. But ultimately, with this very, very recent decision from the court, I can't imagine that any of the justices have changed their minds, nor do I imagine that any of these maps are actually compliant with the VRA. I mean, it is very, very explicit about creating an opportunity district, not a one-off random election possibility for Democrats, possibility for minority voters. This needs to be consistent. This needs to be embedded in their political structure to allow minority voters to have a voice, and that's exactly what this court case is going to do for Democrats and black voters in the state of Alabama. But as I was saying, 2024 will be coming around the corner, and every single seat will matter. I'm interested to see what ends up happening, who ends up being the representative. Right now, it has been practically the same person election after election. I believe it's pronounced Terry Sewell, the Democratic incumbent, who has been here for quite a long time, representing Alabama's 7th Congressional District, the sole Democrat from the entire state of Alabama, soon to be 2. That's why I said it will be interesting. We will see who this new House Democrat is. We will see how much Republicans funnel money into some of the earlier elections. Start to see maybe if they think if it's a Biden plus 7 district, it's winnable, which in a way it might be. But I do believe that where we are right now with the special master, with those who are working in compliance with the VRA, there's a strong possibility too that the other district doesn't end up being a swing district like the one proposed here. This map was proposed. I think there is a lot of conversation around whether or not this map was made to appease Republicans to be adopted nearly immediately, just as, some type of, recognition that it is a red state and that it is a Democratic district, but still could go to the GOP in a perfect circumstance. I think there's a possibility the special master finds a way to draw 2 safe blue districts. And that ultimately would be very bad news for the GOP, because it means throughout the decade, Alabama won't be cracked because the Republican parts will be maxed out, the Democratic parts will be maxed out, and there isn't much room for growth for the national GOP. They really believed in their national, map here that they were dominating in the South. And to be quite honest with you, they have been. South Carolina is 6-1. In the state of Louisiana, it's 5-1. That's why these states are now being relitigated for violating the Voting Rights Act. You can see, too, here in Tennessee, it's 8-1, right? If an argument can be made in Alabama, chances are an argument can be made and won in South Carolina, in Louisiana, potentially in Tennessee, certainly in Georgia, is being made in the state of Florida. I don't know if you just saw, but a Florida court just struck down the congressional map in Florida, ordering a redraw. It's going to go to the Florida Supreme Court, but we will see where it goes ultimately, how far it goes up the appeal chain, how far it goes up the court chain, because that could make a difference. Florida is also a very populous state. Should there be an additional district in Alabama, should there be an additional district in Florida that puts Democrats 2 seats closer? It seems like it's so far away, but all Democrats need is 5. And again, I told you this before. There are many, many cases out there expected to relitigate the maps in Georgia, South Carolina, in even Tennessee. Already, I told you Florida, in Louisiana, and also because New York has the ability, because of a new Supreme Court, they have already taken up a case surrounding redistricting, and there's a strong possibility that New York is redrawn even more in favor of the National Democratic Party. Right now, New York is much closer than anyone could have predicted. It is in 2022, 15-11. We can imagine that in 2024, should the map's partisanship hold out, based on expectations, you're talking around anywhere between, 20-6, right? Something as low as that for Republicans, potentially even worse, given some of the potential gerrymanders that they have put forth in other circumstances. In the 2022 map for 2020 redistricting, New York Democrats have been brutal, which is why the Democratic court struck it down. But there's a new Chief Justice, a more pro-legislature court that will likely side with them on future decisions surrounding redistricting. So all around bad news for the GOP when it comes down to redistricting, with exceptions being in North Carolina, potentially Ohio, which might not end up happening. Ultimately, though, the Alabama court here, what we found with this federal court striking down the map yet again is they are reaffirming that Democrats are right in assuming that the VRA is violated here. It will send a message again to many other southern states with very similar maps. And as court cases start to get decided, because many of these, cases have been brought up following Alabama's decision in July 2023, we're starting to see more decisions come through. And again, reaffirming, telling again to these southern justices that this is wrong, that it does in fact violate the VRA, and many other states likely will follow through in conjunction with traditional redistricting that's happening in some of these states as a result of new leadership in their state Supreme Courts, all of which, in nearly every circumstance, again, the exception being North Carolina, benefiting the Democratic Party in their 2024 House elections. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2024 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.